warm welcome today to the Digiloglounge live from ZKM in Karlsruhe. My name is Sabine Faller and I'm a research associate at the ZKM Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, Germany. I will accompany you today through an online discussion at Digiloglounge, a project of the Digilog at BW Research Network founded by the Baden-Württemberg Ministry of Science, Research and Arts. So what is Digilog actually about? Digilog stands for digitalization in dialogue. That means our research teams are not only investigating in current topics related to the digital transformation, they are also developing ideas for a co-design, and they are inviting you to think and discuss together in a dialogue. So you're invited today as well. Check our Telegram channel. It's called ZKM_Digiloglounge, or you can type in your questions later when we go to the questions and answer moment with our expert in YouTube. There's a channel too for your question. So today, big surprise in a way, like that we have you here. I'm very happy. We are going to talk with our expert, Solange Martinez Demarco from the International Center for Ethics in the Sciences and Humanities of the University of Tübingen. And we will talk about diversity in the IT, a very actual topic. Welcome, Sol.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sabine.
Perfect. I will introduce you in a moment with your biography, and then I'm very looking forward to your introduction into your research project. So yes, before we go deeper into your project, I'll start with your brief introduction. I have tried to shorten it a bit because you have made so much interesting things. So you studied political science at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and you hold a European Master in Comparative Local Development that you did at the University of Trento in Italy. And you are MA in European Studies on Society, Science and Technology that you have done in Maastricht at the Maastricht University in the Netherlands. So I think you have seen half of the world. And since September 2017, you are now a research associate at the International Center for Ethics in the Sciences and Humanities. It's shortly known as IZEW in German, at the University of Tübingen. And there you are working on the researching projects related to the ethical and social implications of different technological developments. Okay, a lot of technological things inside, sorry. Yeah, you're also a PhD student at the Ruhr University Bochum, researching IT communities of volunteers and their practices. Okay, that was my brief introduction to you. And now I'm really looking forward. Let's start with your project presentation. It's your turn now, Sol. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Hello to Sabine and to everyone. I'm really happy to be here today at the Digiloglounge, and thank you also to the ZKM for the organization. So let me start sharing my screen first of all. Let me see that it's working. The topic of my presentation today, is diversity in IT. And I guess, as Sabine said, that is very actual. So everyone more or less know about it, or at least have a sort of an idea of what diversity in IT is about. Let's go. So what I have planned for today was to tell you a story, actually, the story of the pipeline model, of the STEAM pipeline model, and in particular the leaky pipeline, because this is one of the, so to say, three narratives that I have identified are somehow underpinning the idea of inclusion in IT. And so even if the audience hasn't really heard about or read about the leaky pipeline, once I introduce it or I introduce the origins of the pipeline, they will understand what I'm talking about. And then I will move forward to present the problems of understanding diversity in IT through the leaky pipeline metaphor. And well, you will see that the audience will see that there are many problems. And of course, I'm not going to stop in the problems. I'm just going to move forward and present some critical perspectives that are trying to disentangle the problems and to present some other ways to understand diversity and inclusion in IT. And this will turn into some actions, which I basically present as diversity spaces. And well, I will close with kind of a short introduction to some different of these diversity spaces. What I want to stress here is that my research is on IT communities of volunteers, but I have just started, so I cannot really introduce details about them, and also because I want to preserve their anonymity. But I'm pretty sure that at the end of the presentation, everyone will have or will question what inclusivity and diversity in IT mean. And then, of course, I will just hand over to Sabine and open the floor for comments and questions. So let's go. So first of all, I need to make a disclaimer here because, well, basically, the pipeline model, the STEAM pipeline model is coming from the US. So what I will present is the result of a conversation with Anglo-American scholars or scholars that are focusing on these places, but nevertheless, I want to stress that this metaphor is actually valid for basically any country that is focusing on inclusivity or diversity in IT, because basically technology developments are spreading in one way or another, supported by this narrative and by the economic and political power of the US. So yes, it works even if it's Germany in this case, is any other country in the world. Basically, the narrative sort of works very well and bad sort of. So yeah, it originated in the US. Basically, you can find reports from the National Science Foundation written around the 70s and 80s that were talking about a problem with the pipeline. So let's put this in focus. So during these years, the 70s, the 80s, there was a Cold War, and the NSF was doing some kind of projections of the US labor force necessary to support the techno-scientific development. So they were looking into how much money was needed for infrastructure and for the labor force. And this is to continue this kind of race that they were having with the Soviet Union and Japan. And so the pipeline model emerged because, well, they realized there wasn't enough scientists and engineers to support the techno-scientific development they were wishing for. And they realized as well that something could be done about it. There was some kind of labor force that was missing, the diversity, women and people of color in this case, in the case of the US, that were untapped resources, a valuable group that could be bring to the pipeline. And what is the pipeline? Basically, is kind of a line, just as a path that shows you linearly how you enter through preschool or primary school, and you finish your education, and that means your PhD, and you either go to academia to be a scientist or engineer, or you go to the professional world to be hired by some kind of private company. And so they were not coming enough people from this tube, and they realized, well, there is a lot of people out there, women and people of color, that we can just bring to this pipeline. And so what this produced was that basically there was supposed to be enough labor force at the end of the day to support the development. But that in their projections didn't happen. And it didn't happen because people were dropping out at every stage of this pipeline, or at every stage of the educational trajectory from the trajectory, and therefore were kind of leaking. And even though the problem was in general, all the workforce was not enough, they saw, and this is also very challenging, but I'm not going to go into this part. They just pointed out at the diversity as the problem, as those people that were leaking from the pipeline. And so the issue has been up to now that different policies and projects and actions have been trying to either just close the leaks or to bring even more people into the pipeline, bring more children, and then to take out that, or have at the end of the pipe also more people. So the idea of solving this, to actually bring in more or to closing the leaks, sounds perfect. However, we need to understand that closing these leaks or bringing more in is just a very narrow way of understanding the problem of diversity in IT. This is because the actions that been pushed forward are basically supported by a liberal feminist understanding of what could be done. So it's just leveling the playing field. So to bring more women and minorities, or to give them more access to technology and to technological spaces, and to think that with more access, things are going to be okay. Technology is neutral, and they just need to have the opportunity to access it. So it's just a very liberal thinking that technology is neutral, that this is a matter of having the same opportunities and the same rights. And therefore, success has been limited, of course. Some barriers have been removed, so some changes in the educational curricula have been done, and in terms of recruiting and retention in the labor force have also been adopted, and this has improved the number of diverse people in IT. But again, this is a limited understanding, because it's in the end it's focusing on the individual and discrimination and bias at individual level. And so if the plan B is broken, or if at the end of the pipe, what you're gonna find is a sewage treatment plant, it means that the model is not correct to understand the problem of diversity in IT. And for that reason, there has been enough research about this, and there is still more. So these are just 4 of the problems that I have identified. The problems are here just to highlight that with the metaphor, there is so much that can be done regarding diversity, but let's go into them. So the first thing is to think again about this linear trajectory. So we have people entering and then people going out. What would be the problem there? Well, I think it's easy. Have you ever actually asked these people if they want to come in? Or just as I showed on the previous slide, would they want to come out if what they see at the end of the tube is just really bad for them? No. So basically here, the problem is that there is no agency in this metaphor. We are just considering these people as objects that are needed. Sometimes it's because the techno-scientific system needs more of them, sometimes because businesses are just running low of employees and they need more people. But at the end of the day, nobody asks them if they want to be part of it. The other problem is that this metaphor is only taking into account a very narrow understanding of how you go about your life or how people go about their lives. So if we see it again that things are leaking, it's not because they leak and they don't come back, or they leak and that means it's wrong. So especially for women and minorities, if they come out of the pipeline, it's not because they want to just drop out. Life happens, and there are very many reasons to think about this coming in and out of the pipeline. Care work is one of them. So again, there is no agency and no alternative pathway to enter the IT field. And also, IT field considered a very narrow understanding. So it's computer science. All that you're gonna read about IT is computer science. And computers are used in other technological fields. And this means that if you see women and minorities in other fields learning and using technology, you actually don't see them. They are not there. So the diversity in technology is also a problem of how technology is defined. And furthermore, we are considering that these diverse people are just very narrowly defined. If we take a look at the statistics of the countries that do produce statistics regarding diversity in technology, basically they are about a biological distinction between men and women, and that is all that you're gonna find. And so this is just the natural understanding of who these diverse people are. You might find, and yes, of course, in the US is the case, that you also see some other diverse people of color. And so you can find comparisons between women and men, or white male and the rest of the racial groups and all together, or the most that you're gonna find is an intersectional understanding between gender and race. So it's women of color. But this again is kind of in the US, basically US, UK. But just because there are no statistics, and when they do when they do collect the statistics, countries are moving the most for female and male. And yeah, of course, this metaphor is also wrong because it's not taking into account the history of computing. And there is a lot of research done about it. and showing how women were computers, or actually how women and some minorities were there from the very beginning of the computer science field, but well, they were expelled. And the history of computing actually is showing more than they just were expelled, but it shows how there was a process of co-creation of this understanding of computing as male labor, and so the labor power distribution and relations, and that some practices and some skills and some knowledge are for or are technology or are IT, and those are belonging to men, and all these other dimensions that one can consider for identities, such as gender and sexuality and race and class, are, well, moved outside of the technological field. So there is this co-construction of what is technology, which are the dimensions of technology, and who are the ones that count in and count out of the technological field. So yeah, this all has happened. All these problems have been identified basically because there are critical perspectives that allow for this understanding, for showing the shortcomings of this metaphor that is actually a narrative. You see that there are not enough diversities, and you don't only describe the problem, but you need to create a story behind it. This narrative is one of them, but also somehow through this evolution turns into a normative understanding of why and why there is a lack of diversity and who are the diverse people that are missing. And so these critical perspectives are very much queer perspectives, techno-feminist perspectives, so perspectives that are historically focused on, again, history of the co-production of technologies and certain ideologies and normativities and inequalities. And so the real problem here is that, as I previously mentioned, if we just go for the leaky pipeline model and we focus on just closing the leaks and not seeing that the structure is wrong because what is outside of it is wrong, because there are some values and some beliefs, some practices that are reproducing inequalities and powers differentials based on this understanding of technology as male, and those that are gender different, sexually different, racially different, class different, are not inside technology, and when they are lower in this hierarchy of who is connected to IT, then of course we can see the problems that I previously presented. So well, these techno-scientific criticisms are coming, as I said, from queer and techno-feminist perspectives that are, of course, opposing the idea that technology is neutral. As I said, they have some values inscribed on them, some beliefs, some understanding of who can do technology and how technology can be done. They are rejecting these traditional gender and racial and class hierarchies. And of course, they are rejecting heteronormative. Identity is not simple a matter of female and males, and there is a real understanding of the intersectionality of these different dimensions and how they produce even more structural differences and inequalities. All of this is supported by a patriarchal understanding of society, of relations and values and beliefs, and is intertwined with a capitalist and colonialist and understanding of the differentials that they create. And of course, this is something that's geographically different. So it's important to keep in mind that these critical perspectives are always focused on the context, and they are always focused on situated knowledge. It's not that technology is only neutral in the sense that gender or race or sexuality and so on, but also in terms of geography, it becomes very different how it plays. And so this is why the intersection of capitalism and colonialism, besides just simply patriarchy. I think I have already said enough about the theoretical framework, but there hasn't been just this kind of critique for this just because we want to critique, but because we want to have something different. And so while there is a lot of scholarship, there is also a lot of action into diversity in IT, and action in the sense of reframing what diversity and inclusion can mean and how technology is understood. And so there has been, not so much research, but a lot of practical action on creating alternative spaces where they put into practice this theoretical critical perspective. And these places that are basically trying to, as I said, understand technology and these different dimensions of subjectivity differently, are also just trying to put forward some very, put forward something interesting for them and interesting for technology. And in that sense, they are producing knowledge, but they are producing it collectively. And they are also trying to be autonomous from big corporations and big techno-scientific systems. And they look for egalitarian and sometimes also anti-capitalist relations. And one can think that because of these ideas, these principles, they relate very well with hackers or free, libre, open source environments. But the point is that even in these places, they are not accepted, because these hacker spaces usually have this idea of openness, but they usually have also this idea of meritocracy. Who is the one that has the knowledge? Again, the male. And so what the problem here is that there is a lot of sexism, racism, LGBT phobia, and a lot of marginalization once again. And therefore these women and other minorities just go on their own. They set up their own spaces where they self-include in technology, and they play with their bodies and they play with technology. They learn about technology, they learn how to code, they learn how to even hack their bodies. And well, in this sense, what they are doing is just trying to be very reflective about what inclusion is, and what diversity is, and what technology is. And so to conclude and not keep you hearing me talk so much, I'm just gonna introduce some of these projects that I mentioned at the beginning. There are these diversity spaces in IT. These, as I said, are not the ones that I'm doing research about, but that I thought could be really interesting in order to understand how to think about diversity and inclusion in other terms. So at the top, you will see Miss Balthasar Laboratory, which is a feminist hacker space in Vienna. And at the bottom, Mami, which is an art exhibition, but only online. I put them together to show how these diversity spaces can play online, but also offline, or to be properly set up in a place and to be only online. And also because Mami is interesting in the sense that those who can read Spanish and Portuguese will learn that has a really interesting story. The website works as a kind of exhibition done for people in the future where patriarchy is gone, where the capitalist system is gone. And they are learning through the art how technology and the patriarchy and the capitalist system were working in our time. So it plays very much with a speculation about how the future can be. And well, these other two projects are also interesting. In one case, at the top, La Beca is also a feminist hacker space, with the particularity that they either provide you or teach you how to set up your own feminist server and playing with the Spanish instead of being a male server is a female server, so servidora. And at the bottom, for those watching from Germany and Austria, you have the Nifty website, the network of groups in Germany and Austria that are working for minorities in technology in those two countries. So with this, I will close my presentation. I will go back to Sabine, and I'm open to comments, feedback, questions.
So thanks, Sol, very much for your exciting insight into your research and a bit of this history as well in this big field of diversity in politics. And so I think we will start directly with the questions from the public. And so type your questions, ideas, comments. You can join us on the Telegram group, ZKM_Digiloglounge, or you can directly type in at the YouTube chat. And while the public is typing, I will start with a question. Maybe we go a little bit back into the history, and I would like to know, like, when I think about Hidden Figures, the movie, it's like a jump into the time back. Black women in computing were actually the pioneers. They were programming the first US general purpose computer, ENIAC it was called, in 1944, so really a long time ago. But I'm wondering, what do you think? Why did these role models in a way disappear? I mean, of course, you have explained a lot with the pipeline model, but yeah, like your thoughts, I'm very interested in what you think, why these, it's said in the name of the movie as well, like hidden figures, in a way, the male-made story did not support them anymore. Yeah, and when we look at the numbers of women today who are into coding or programming, it's still, there are still these places needed, like you have told us now, that this diversity spaces. So what do you think, what was happening, or why is it like it is now at the moment?
Yeah, so yeah, first of all, thank you for the question. One interesting thing about the pipeline model and the leaky pipeline model is that it emerged in the 70s, the moment where actually diversity was going down, and in the US and a bit later on in the UK. And it's really interesting in this sense to read about the history of computing in the US and the UK. It's through Janet Abate's work or Mar Hicks' work. They basically tell you that there was a process of turning coding and programming into a male profession. This was not something that happened from one day to other. And because this didn't happen in just a blink, one cannot say that there is only one reason, and I can definitely not answer for all these potential reasons. I can just take some of the ideas from the authors I just mentioned and said that, well, at the beginning, yeah, women were the computing, and then they were the programmers. But one thing that that you or me as a person, or the audience as a person, needs to keep in mind is that this was kind of a secretarial work. So this was already down in the hierarchy. At that time, men were actually playing with the computers, with the tools, with these very huge mainframes that were taking whole buildings. And the women were just typing in. So that was not actually seen as very important. Of course, as the IT industry progressed, things were different, and here comes the different process through which somehow women were just expelled from the programming section of computing as well. In the case of the US, this was mainly done by a consultancy that was done sometime around the 60s, where there was this really big IT company in the US that asked a consultant company to identify the specific characteristics of the programming people, or what they needed to think about when they were looking for new employees. And so this consultant company, what it did was to interview basically 1,000 people. And of these 1,000 people, let's say something like 900 people were men. So they identified some characteristics that were proper of men. And therefore, you see that some characteristics that were from men in just this particular group were moved to this industry. This company in particular was so big that what they identify as the main characteristic for a person programming just moved to the rest of the companies. And this is what happened in the US. In the UK is another story. It's not a consultancy. In this case was actually how the government decided to somehow expel women, giving them less responsibilities and switching to different types of computers. But at the end of the day, this was a historical evolution towards an understanding of technology as something for men and about men, and men as technology, technology as men.
Okay. Yeah. But to jump back to now and a little bit before, I mean, in the 90s as well, with the Cyborg Manifesto from Donna Haraway, an artist, and as well the cyborg or cyber movement in feminism as well. I think there were a lot of steps done and gone already, like to make IT more equal. But when we look at your work, like what do you think is the potential for the future through the work of the communities? What do you think are the possibilities for them to change the system? You have talked about the structure. Do you think they can, I think big now, create a more egalitarian society?
So I want to believe in it. I want to believe they can make a difference. And they can make a difference because they are situated and they are not just taking for granted that technology is neutral, and because they are not understanding inclusion or diversity in one way. So in every place, you will see that what diverse is different, and they discuss what diversity is. They reflect on the work they are doing, and they open and close their spaces accordingly. So it's really interesting to observe that they are also excluding some people, but they are doing it because they discuss the reasons for this. They are not just excluding everyone. They are not including everyone either, of course, but the point here is that this is a process. So one day they could decide to exclude someone, but this is not and done. Just this moment, we decided that these people should be out, but this can change in the future. And they are very much aware of this. You interview them and they tell you this.
Yeah. It's interesting that you have to work with the same tools like the other side in a way to show them through this perspective how it feels when you are excluded or treated like a minority in a way. Maybe we go on talking about the challenges for the communities at the moment that work in that field. What are your what at the moment from your project, from your work, what can you say, like, what are the big challenges for them?
So, well, there is a kind of a challenge here. This is not a matter of scale, but to the reproduction of these spaces. So you saw the map of these diversity spaces in Germany and Austria, but such a map, I haven't found them in the rest of the world. And especially when you look into the global south, definitely they are there, but you don't know about them. So they need to become visible in one way, and in the other way, they need to reproduce themselves. You need more of them and more of them. And that is very difficult because it's the global south and they don't have the money to do it. So to say, they don't have the technology to do it, and they don't have even the infrastructure to work for it. Basically, one can think that in Germany, these are all offline spaces. So they are located in a specific, so to say, building or house or hackerspace or institution. But this is not the case for the whole world, particularly for the global south. It's very difficult to find them located in one place.
Okay. Maybe let's go on with this idea of transparency for the future of the groups. Have they already joined forces? I was thinking about the Black Lives Matter community, like they have made it finally to really like bundle their energy in a movement, or like are there some ideas at the moment, a platform online when a lot is like in the offline as a space?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I would say networks of these different spaces exist, and one can think of the Association for Progress Communication as one of the focal points for these networks of different diversity spaces. And one can focus on the work they've been doing through their website, through the genderit.org website, or through the feminist principles for internet. So they are to some extent visible. A lot of more work needs to be done, but on the other side, or the negative aspects or becoming more visible or connected even more, is that one can hear they say, well, if we are more visible, then we can more easily become the target of these misogynist, sexist, racist, and so on really negative actions towards them. So yeah, we can see that they have good reasons and not so good reasons to stay more outside of the visibility.
Okay, yeah, an important aspect. Yes, I understand. Maybe I jump over to the next question, like how can I imagine is your research? Like, how do you research about these communities? Like a little insight into your work.
Why not? So, I had this idea before the pandemic. So this is a really important point to make, because what I wanted to do is to actually interview the people in person, to see how they interact in person, to see how they play with technology in person. And this hasn't been the case because then the pandemic erupted and I couldn't actually join them in their activities offline, so to say. So what I'm doing at the moment is something more invisible and sometimes boring, because definitely a face-to-face is more interesting. But I'm just following their social media accounts. I'm reading their newsletters if they have activities online, because of course they do have them. I joined them. I've been in particular following the backstage of setting up one of these big activities, the organization of a feminist conference in IT, and learning how actually this, that sounds like very tedious and boring and even something easy to do, it is a lot of work, and you know it for sure. And the people doing the backstage of this recording also know it. So I'm learning about how this actually works. And when I'm learning about this, actually, I'm learning how they play with technology and how technology is not something that is about males. They are very much focused on having non-cis people, non-cis hetero, no cis male, and this is because they are focusing on this is happening in one specific countries, but focusing on this today, as I said, might be the way of being inclusive today, but they can rethink about this and the next year be inclusive in other ways.
Mm-hmm. Sol, it would be great if you share some links later for the Telegram chat with us. Yeah. So we can do a little research afterwards as well and check some of the groups and their work. It would be very nice. Yeah, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the goals for Digilog. What is your desired goal? Maybe not at the end, but meanwhile, what's your wish for your research?
So what I'm focusing on with the Digilog project is actually to give a bit more of visibility to these diversity of spaces, to try to question what diversity and inclusion in IT means, and also to see differences in terms of what communities are doing in one country, because I'm focusing in Germany, but I'm also focusing in communities in Argentina, and then with these differences also to appreciate the diversity in other terms. It's easy to understand, as I said, because of differentials of money, for example. One can see that is the idea of having a server is not something that in Germany is impossible to think, but yeah, definitely is much more difficult if you go to Latin America.
Yeah, then we talk about access as well. When we talk about IT or in Latin America, that's a big topic, I can imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So with the pandemic, it has been like made more obvious that the access to computers and internet is very, very important and very unequal. Just to give you an example, my connection here today, I'm at home, and it's just the basic that I can buy in Germany, basically. So 50 megabits per second is kind of really low, but this is unbelievable for a country like Argentina. You're not gonna get that in Argentina. It's the most is 15 megabits. So if they have broadband internet, it's 15, or they have to use 4G, and 4G is not the 4G of Germany. So yeah, access is kind of one of the main points that they are working on.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the future and the access as well in the future. What be your personal vision for the internet of the future? Like in a combination with the vision for the communities, like how they are into the world of IT, creating and have a place there, fixed place there, or what? Yeah, let's talk. Oh, so many questions. Let's talk about voices too that design the internet.
Yeah, so actually, the funny part here is that also one can see differences among these different communities. One of them, or one representative of one of these communities, told me, well, my wish is that we don't need a community like this in the future. And other communities are not thinking like this, because they realize this is a struggle that even if can be partially solved one day, this is bound to be contested and continuously being pushed forward and backwards. And so the future is to be decided, but I believe that a big push forward can work, can happen, but we cannot simply believe that these communities will just disappear. But yeah, might be that their understanding of diversity becomes more ingrained and valued, and therefore there is less need of calling them diversity spaces.
Okay. And so let's come to last question. Like, what was a surprise for you in your research until so far? What didn't you expect before?
So actually what I didn't expect was to have so many difficulties in terms of gaining trust from these communities to do my research about them. But this again talks about these problems between being visible and invisible, and between letting anyone in and being more exclusive. I think I will be more cautious with my next research and take more time in terms of learning how to gain trust with my subjects of study. But although it's a challenge, it also shows me that it's great. I mean, because it's a challenge, I want to overcome it.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I don't know, maybe after Corona, you have the possibility to meet the communities in Latin America, and then like live friendship maybe as well for the future when we were working so intense with them. So all the best for your project from so far, from what I can say. And thank you very much for this really interesting insight into your research project, Sol. And yeah, I hope the Digilog community has enjoyed it too. Today we had not really a lot of questions, but maybe it's a very important but sensible topic as well. So I hope you had a good input and good ideas for the next movements in the internet, and we will put the links later in the chat as well. So I think there will be some good links then to spend some time on the communities. We have the next Digiloglounge date on the 22th of July on a Thursday again, and we will then talk about whom can we trust in the internet, in the digital life. And another interesting topic. I hope I see you then again. Sol, you too. And let's say goodbye to you. And thanks for your time, Sol.
Thank you as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.